Maltese literature is any literature originating from Malta or by Maltese writers or literature written in the Maltese language. This article will give an overview of the history of Maltese language literature. Overview. History. Written Maltese. As Maltese evolved after Count Roger I of Sicily ended Arab rule on the island at the end of the 11th century. There was little interest in developing a written form of the language. Initially only the clergy, aristocracy and bourgeoisie were able to read and write, and much of their communication was conducted in Latin. Throughout the centuries, use of the Maltese language was often discouraged with varying enthusiasm, ostensibly in the hope that supplanting it would strengthen ties with the country which held possession of Malta at that particular point in time. Under the Knights of St. John, both Italian and French were used for official documents and correspondence. During the British colonial period, the use of English was encouraged through education, with Italian regarded as the next most influential language. It was not until 1936 that Maltese was recognized as the island's official language. Uniquely, no other European country lacked a standardized written form of its language until the 19th century, when men such as Michiel Anton Vasili made a concerted effort to transcribe spoken Maltese into a written form. Although examples of written Maltese exist from as early as the 15th century, diglossia, the development of native Maltese literary works, has historically been hampered by the diglossia that has characterized the culture of Malta throughout its history. For many centuries, Maltese was known as the language of the kitchen and the workshop, while Italian was the language of education, literature, the arts, law and commerce. Hence, until the early 20th century, the vast majority of literary works in Malta were written in Italian by the community of Maltese Italians. In early Maltese history, diglossia manifested itself in the coexistence of a developed form of Siculo-Arabic and the language of a series of rulers, most notably Latin, Greek, Sicilian, French, Spanish and Italian. From 1800 onwards, these were largely supplanted by English. The Maltese language is today heavily overlaid with Romance and English influences as a result. According to Professor Oliver Frigiera, Maltese writers developed an uninterrupted local Italian literary movement which went on up to about 4 decades ago, whereas Maltese as a literary idiom started to coexist on a wide scale in the last decades of the 19th century. Whilst Maltese has the historical priority on the level of the spoken language, Italian has the priority of being the almost exclusive written medium for the socio-cultural affairs. For the longest period, the native tongue had only to wait for the arrival of a new mentality which could integrate an unwritten, popular tradition with a written, academically respectable one. The emergence of Maltese literature. The oldest known literary text in the Maltese language is Pietro Caxera's poem, Cantilena, followed by Gianfrancesco Bonamico's sonnet of praise to Grand Master Niccolò Cotona, Medjugorje, Blood, Usaha, 1672. The earliest known Maltese dictionary was written by François de Vie and Thesancourt. In 1700, an anonymous Gozatin poet wrote Jahazra Mingaj Dia. A Maltese translation of the Lord's Prayer appeared in Johannes Heinrich Myers' work Specimen Lingua Punici Hodie Melitensium Superstitus, demonstrating the formerly wide-held belief that the language had a Punic heritage. A collection of religious sermons by a certain Don Ignazio Saverio Mifsud, published between 1739 and 1746, is regarded as the earliest known example of Maltese prose. An anonymous poem entitled Fucek Nithadit Malta was written c. 1749, regarding the conspiracy of the slaves. A few years later, in 1752, a catechism entitled Telum Nizrani Ta, Dun Frangisquezino was published in both Maltese and Italian. The occasion of Carnival in 1760 saw the publication of a collection of burlesque verses under the heading Weeg la Maltia, by Dun Felice de Marco, a child of the Romantic movement. Maltese patriot Michiel Anton Vasili hailed the emergence of literary Maltese as one of the ancient patrimonies of the new emerging nation, and saw this nascent trend as the affirmation of the singular and collective identity, and the cultivation and diffusion of the national speech medium as the most sacred component in the definition of the patria and as the most effective justification both for a dominated community's claim to be a nation and for the subsequent struggle against foreign rulers. Between 1798 and 1800, while Malta was under the rule of Napoleonic France, a Maltese translation of El Garnier Attribution Ftel Liberté, by citizen La Carreterie, secretary to the French government commissioner, was published on the occasion of Bastille Day. The first translation into Maltese of a biblical text, the Gospel of St. John, was published in 1822, on the initiative of the Bible Society in Malta. The first Maltese-language newspaper, El Alecandu Caulata Inglesa U Maltia, appeared in 1839, and featured the poems El Imhaba U Fantasija and Sonnet. The first epic poem in Maltese, A Life and Talk, by Giovanni Antonio Vassalio, was published in 1842. Followed by Rage F. Bill Malti and Rage F. Ucajt Bill Malti in 1861 and 1863 respectively. The same author published the first history book in the Maltese language entitled Storja ta Malta Miktuba Gal Poplu in 1862. 1863 saw the publication of the first novel in Maltese, Elvira du Imhabitar, Tiran, by the Neapolitan author, Giuseppe Faliero de Luna. Anton Manuel Caruana's novel Inez Farag, the first Maltese novel, was modeled on traditional Italian historical novels, such as Manzoni's I Promessi Sposi, and has been the subject of recent scholarly attention. Notable Maltese writers: Ruza Briffa, Anton Buttigieg, Ray Buttigieg, Pietro Caxaro, Ninu Cremona, Francis Ebeyer, Achille Mizzi, Oliver Frigiera, Alphonse Maria Galea, Uz Galea, Carmenu Mallier, Herbert Ganado, Gioacchino Navarro, Uz Bonisai, Org Pisani, Duncombe Sailor, Uz Casapulicino, Franz Said, Franz Sammet, Michiel Anton Vasili, Trevor Ara, Godfrey Wettinger, John A. Bonello. Poetry. The Cantilena. The Cantilena is the oldest written text known to exist in Maltese, dating from no later than 1485, the death of Pietro Caxaro, the author it is attributed to. It wasn't rediscovered until 1966 or 1968 by Professor Godfrey Wettinger and Fr. M. Fadney in the Valletta Notarial Archives. Franz Sammet published a revolutionary interpretation of it in 2009. Carmenu Mallier translated it into Esperanto and wrote an article about it in Literatura Foiro. Contemporary literature. The post-war years have seen the emergence of the literary revival movement, the protagonists of which included Oliver Frigiera, Franz Sammet, the national author, Alfred Sant, Lino Spiteri, and others. Among Oliver Frigiera's most important works is the collection of his poems. Franz Sammet's reputation is built on his novels Il Gaga, Samuraj, Paceville and Il Holma Maltia. Alfred Sant is known for his theatre collected mostly in his Fidette Cathedral u Dramiora, whereas Lino Spiteri became renowned for his novel River Luz Jona du Manora and his short stories. Nowadays Maltese literature is dominated by literature in Maltese, some works in English, and some works in Italian, such as the poems of Judge J.J. Cremona and Albert Caruana's e-book Il Sindaco di Raccamuscia. List of books in Maltese. Tahtliet Saltniet. Zedmin El Ispanjoli. Il Gaga. Samuraj. Il Holma Maltia. Paceville.